Good morning, this is Dr. Turner with Integrated Math 3. Today we're going to be talking about 8.1, which is an intro to trigonometry. This may seem like a little bit of a refresher. There are some sections in our textbooks between Integrated Math 2 and 3 that have a little bit of an overlap, sometimes an almost identical overlap. So if it's new material, great. If it's review, great. It should be an easy section. So we'll go ahead and jump right into it with 8.1, Intro to Trigonometry. So in this section, I'm going to pull up my page here real quick. In this section, we're looking at an introduction to trigonometry, which is looking at primarily trigonometric ratios. Now, in trig, you are looking at the relationship between the sides of a right triangle. So you have a right triangle here, as shown. 1, 2, 3. And we're going to be looking at a ratio of those sides. Ratio, of course, being a ratio or a fraction. So, if I'm looking at a given angle, let's say it's this theta, there are 3 sides that are shown. Of course, in a right triangle, you always have the hypotenuse, which is the longest side. And then from there, you have 2 legs. Now, because we're looking at these legs as they correspond to an angle, we're going to have 2 sides. Yes, the other 2 sides are legs, but the side that is opposite the angle, so away from the angle, we are going to call that the opposite side. And the side that is touching, we're going to call the adjacent side. So when we write out our trigonometric ratios, we're going to be comparing 2 of these 3 sides. Technically, there are a set of 6 combinations that can be made here. However, we're just looking at the basic 3. And those basic 3 are known as sine, cosine, and tangent. If you've ever looked at a scientific calculator, I'm sure you've noticed buttons that look like this: SIN, COS, TAN. Well, now we're actually going to be using those functions. We're going to be using those features on your calculator: sine, cosine, and tangent. Sine is defined as the opposite side over the adjacent side. So we're setting a fraction or a ratio, comparing those 2 sides. Sine is opposite over adjacent. Cosine of an angle is going to be... Step back a second. Sorry, sine is defined as opposite over hypotenuse. Getting a little ahead of myself. Cosine is defined as adjacent over hypotenuse. And tangent is defined as opposite over adjacent. So it's just setting a ratio that exists between 2 out of the 3 sides. As I mentioned, there are technically 6 ratios. If we took each of those fractions and flipped them, that would give us the other 3. But in integrated math, we're just introducing the first 3 so far. Okay? Usually, you have access to your notes. If you don't have access to your notes, there is an acronym that kind of helps you memorize the ratios as they exist. And that acronym is SA, CA, TOA. So SOHCAHTOA is taught a lot in schools, and SOHCAHTOA, sine is opposite over hypotenuse, cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse, tangent is opposite over adjacent. So that's one way that you could remember it. So on the assignment, you're going to have a few questions that are just simply asking you, well, what's sine? What's cosine? What's tangent? And you're going to tell me what those ratios are. Okay? From there, the majority of the assignment is going to actually give you numbers here and just ask you to fill in where they are. So I could give you a triangle here, and again, it could be any size right triangle, but it does need to be a right triangle for our purposes right now. And so in this right triangle here, looking at this angle, let's say I give you the measurements of 3, 4, and 5. So for this triangle, the sine of that angle, if I asked you the sine, looking up here, we define sine as being the opposite side over the hypotenuse. So the sine of that angle would be 3 over 5. The opposite side over the hypotenuse 5. And that's all you have to do for this assignment. Just fill in the numbers looking at the diagram. Cosine of that angle. Cosine is defined as adjacent over hypotenuse. So, in this example, adjacent is 4, hypotenuse is 5, and cosine is 4 over 5. And tangent is defined as opposite over adjacent. So, opposite is 3, adjacent is 4. My answer is 3 over 4. That's it. Now there's one caveat here, and again, the triangle can change orientation position. It could be any right triangle. However, sketch this out here. Your hypotenuse, of course, is never going to change, right? Your hypotenuse is always going to be the longest side of your triangle. So regardless, you're going to have the hypotenuse in the same spot. Hypotenuse will always be that longest side. However, if you are looking at what angle you are looking at is going to change which side is opposite and which side is adjacent. So for instance, in this example, I chose this angle down here. By the way, of course, I'm using this symbol. This is a Greek letter theta. If you've never seen that before, that's typically what we're going to use for angle measurements. But it could be any variable. I could put an x there, I could put a z there, but theta is most common when we're talking about angle measurement. So in this triangle that I've drawn down here, this, of course, is going to be my hypotenuse. But if I'm looking at, let's say, this angle, then this is opposite and this is adjacent. Whereas if I'm looking at this angle, then this side's opposite and this side's adjacent. Adjacent means next to, right? So whatever side is touching is the adjacent side, and the one that's farthest away is the opposite side. So let's say we're looking at this angle. And I give you 13, 5, and 12. And I ask you to find the ratios of that angle. So you would just go through. Sine is opposite over hypotenuse. So for this angle, opposite is 12. Hypotenuse is 13. Cosine of that angle, 5 is touching. 13 is the hypotenuse, so that is 5 over 13. And tangent of that angle, opposite is 12, adjacent is 5. So your answer is 12 over 5. That's all you have to do for this section. That's it for today, guys. If you have any questions, please reach out to me. Otherwise, have a good day, and I will talk to you soon. Bye.